I'm sorry, but I need to talk about Highguard. I was deep in the throes of the Mass Effect video, and despite my insistence that I continue working on that one, I just couldn't shake the thought of Highguard. Yes, Highguard, the brand new PvP shooter, base defense, competitive team game, Highguard. The reason I felt like it was so important to talk about this game is because I was having such a hard time finding anyone who was talking about the actual specifics of the game's launch, as well as the discussions around it by Wildlight Studios, the team who made Highguard. Then I noticed immediately, only a few weeks after its launch, a large amount of the team at Wildlight was laid off, and I said, that's it. I'm making a video about goddamn Highguard. Because while I think that there have been some people who have given the game an honest shot, there have been some folks who have genuinely went into the game without bias and saw how it plays, I don't think many of them have done so with the forethought of what the game was supposed to be, or what the original plan was before it was then ceremoniously or unceremoniously thrust at the end of the Game Awards. Highguard is a really weird situation, one where on paper, it seems like every decision made had some merit or skill behind it, but all ended up to form something that was either out of time or out of place. One of the better examples of maybe a good decision at a high level undermined by a bad decision or a lot of uncertain execution. I will preface this very much so by saying this video is going to be a bit against the grain. Not everything I say here will be the most popular of statements, so prepare for that. But first, a word from Gamer Supps, the company that I've been working with for about 7 freaking years now. I am wearing their shirt and I am currently repping all of their stuff. Gamer Supps. Use code Bricky 10% off. I totally forgot to mention this. There's actually 20% off for the next like 5 days. Actually like 20% off. It's all double the discount. Use code Bricky for that. Okay, now for the actual part of the ad. It is the company I've been sponsored with for almost 7 years, and the reason for that is because they make stuff that I use on the daily, and they have also treated me with an immense amount of care and respect, more than any other company I have been sponsored by whatsoever. They continue to iterate on all of their products. Not only do they have the fantastic energy and caffeine-free Gamer Supps things, including dietary supplements and all that kind of stuff, but particularly, they have also given me my own flavor, Sweet 6-Pack, which is a fantastic cherry pineapple combo. Not to mention, they have also expanded, including things like AFK, which is melatonin and various things to help with sleep aid. They've also done something called Gamer Aid, which is actually a creatine and more potassium hydration-based thing. That is a nice little light thing I like to enjoy after workouts because it's the other half of my creatine. That is what is in this right here. And they've also moved forward with things like merchandise, really, really good merchandise. A little jealous sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. And then of course, all of their different shaker cups and jugs. They constantly are coming out with new things, new lines, and inviting a ton of new creators to join them. Some of my favorite flavors include Russian Badgers, Guacamole Gamer Fart 9000, Papa Meat's raw meat flavor. It's actually fantastic, as well as a few of my various VTuber friends flavors as well. It's all great stuff, and I would definitely check it out at gamersupps.com/Bricky or use code Bricky for 10% off your order. Thank you for sponsoring the video. Now, back to Highguard. Now, firstly, I'm sure you're wondering what a Highguard is if you've never ended up playing it. Many of you have heard the game, but it's been somewhat confused by what it actually is. What a game of Highguard looks like is a combination of Apex Legends, CSGO, and honestly a lot more paladins than you'd expect. You start up by picking a warden, which is one of the many hero type characters in the game. You then choose a style of base, and then you begin a gearing up phase, which involves reinforcing your base and then venturing out to get as much gear as you can from the map. Now, if you're familiar with Apex, then you will be very familiar with the gear system of the game. You have armor, ammunition, weapons, and utilities, and they all run around with a similar gray, blue, purple, orange type thing. They have their own effects, they have their own upgrades, etc. This is as you would expect. Then after you're geared up, you will fight over something called the Shield Breaker, a huge sword that is used to break into your opponent's base. Once broken into, you begin the raid, and a bunch of really skilled Korean guys start beating the shit out of you. I hope it's Korean and not Japanese. We'll find out. This is where the game becomes CSGO. The attacking players receive limited lives and attempt to plant a bomb on one of 3 objectives. The 2 side objectives need to both be destroyed to win, or the middle one can be destroyed by itself to win, but it takes much longer and it's easier to defend. Now, if the team runs out of lives, you return back to the original starting world and you do it over again, just this time with better loot options. So when I say the game is a mix of a lot of things at once, that is absolutely the case. It has a hero shooter aspect with its characters, it has CSGO style bomb planting and defusing as an endgame, and then the actual gunplay, UI, armor is very much Apex Legends. Now, if you're watching this video, there might be 2 things you're here for. Either a genuine review of Highguard, or discussion on the development and the things surrounding Highguard, and whether or not Jeff Keighley is going in the company death note held in the back room of Wildlight Entertainment. I plan to provide you with all of that, but it's going to be a bit intertwined between itself, so that'll require me to work really hard on my transitions. So Wildlight has been extremely tight-lipped about this game, so finding specific details is relatively difficult. Now, I have been a Titanfall fan for a long while. I played a lot of Apex in the beginning, so while I do have some contacts at Wildlight or people who know people at Wildlight, I do obviously want to keep most of that as just sort of like Bricky hearsay and kind of try to go with most of the stuff that's been said actually publicly online. What can be found is that the studio was developed in 2021 officially, and their company was made fully public on what they were working on in 2023 based on a post from Chad Grenier on their Twitter account. Now Chad was the game director on Apex and also the game director on Highguard. Now, they're a team of about 100 people, and according to Dusty Welch, who was their founder, CEO, about 60 of the 100 were from the Titanfall or Apex team and had left Respawn prior. Now, the team being so secretive on the project was 100% on purpose. They wanted to be tight-lipped about everything and treat it much like they treated Apex. The entire foundation of Highguard was personified by the idea of low and slow. It was a test of a new IP, and much like with Apex, they wanted it to start getting its footing and feedback from players over time to allow it to form into what they wanted it to be. Now, you may or may not remember this, but Apex Legends was a complete shadow drop. EA and Respawn just started a stream with a bunch of static map images of the game, and then like an hour in, played a trailer, announced the title, and a whole bunch of major FPS streamers and folks began a sponsored stream of it. Now, this worked wonders for the game. Obviously, not being Titanfall 3 was disappointing to many, myself included, but we weren't quite in Battle Royale fatigue yet, and it was doing something rather new and completely different, especially having modern fluid shooting controls, which its competition did not have. You can see Highguard taking a super similar approach to everything, with the exception of the Game Awards announcement. They were completely radio silent all the way up to the game's launch. Then a ton of FPS streamers were sponsored by it, and it was available to play. Now, in doing research for this video, thank you, Possum, one of the most fascinating things I saw was discussion on the development of the game, because the design philosophy and initial bits for this game really make sense on paper. To begin, Wildlight's goal was to always make a shooter. The team are shooter fans. They've worked on shooters. They love shooters. It was always going to be a competitive shooter. That was the goal from day one. And they do not believe in the idea of fatigue within the confines of a multiplayer shooter. They believe that the end product is a game that is truly unique in style, and metrics show that the genre is still very viable. Now, I do disagree a little bit with the genre viability, but I can disagree with the idea that their end product is truly unique in style. It may be a hodgepodge of a bunch of things together, but there is nothing else that plays like this game. Forming Wildlight gave them freedom that wasn't offered with Respawn. Now, at Respawn, the idea of doing a non-Apex game was impossible, and they were locked into its success. But a new studio meant they could do things from scratch, especially with a new IP. They wanted to do something different than Apex, and this was the way to go about it. Development for this game was geared to the fact that they wouldn't know the audience until after the release. So with the experience of the Apex release timeline in mind, they built Highguard so that it has a year's worth of content ready ready to go upon release. That way, the focus can be on hotfixes and patches while the content is explored in real time so they can assess feedback as the game and its subsequent updates came out. Now, originally, the game was going to include a much higher configuration with multiplayer combat. At one point, the matches included 8-player teams, and then that was whittled down to 6v6, 5v5, 4v4, and finally 3v3. The size of the maps remained mostly the same throughout, even with the removal of those many players, because the idea was that the players could then gear up without fear of immediate enemy pressure. Mounts were not originally part of the game, but then they were added for convenience sake. Another early design idea for the game was the base building aspect to it, but this was also scrapped. And other early things were scrapped too, and they might be added to future episodes of the game. Now, the team embraced the concept of something more fantasy-like for the game's aesthetic because it offered a more unique theme. To quote, "We like guns that feel and sound real and meaty and shoot real bullets." So we started there. And then we didn't want to make sci-fi for our whole lives. The tech in the world they described as World War I++. They didn't want any magic wands or magic powers that came from the hands of the player, as this would take away from the guns. They wanted it to be meaty shooting with some occasional sparkle powers in there for use in the map. Though the goal was to make a more unique shooting experience with a lot of attention to the game modes and the map exploration, the game ended up becoming a hero shooter anyways. Now, lead designer Carlos Pineda acknowledges that people don't really like heroes, but they, quote, make the game better, and that's really the important part, unquote. So I really want to break this down because I think it's super important. I don't think any part of the lineup of decisions that were made in the production of Highguard was in a vacuum wrong. Wildlight is made up of shooter veterans who have spent most of their careers working on shooter games. This is something that I am very aware of. They believe in a competitive shooter and wanted to make one, and that part of Highguard is admittedly very, very good. The actual shooting in the game feels fantastic. The reload animations for all the weapons look great. The movement and gunplay moment to moment is easily Highguard's best attribute. Despite all of the shade we might throw at a game like Apex for monetization and balance decisions and the like, the gunplay of Apex, and especially of Titanfall, is excellent, and it is very clear that Wildlight is great at doing exactly this kind of combat. The thing is, Wildlight is made up of developers from a very specific era of gaming, and that was the competitive shooters era of the mid-2000s and beyond. These are developers that grew up on games like Counter-Strike and other intense shooters, and therefore there is a paramount focus on one thing, and that is the clarity of gameplay and visuals. And if not that, extreme balancing. Clarity of gameplay is something you see a lot in a game like Valorant, for example. If there is a backdrop or an environment that will cause an enemy to not be perfectly visible and outlined against it, they will remove or change that backdrop. If a move provides just a little too much visual clutter, it will be toned down. Gameplay is king at all times, and because of that, great lengths are taken to make sure that clarity is maintained, and most importantly, fair. Fair is the key word here. Now, I'm not saying the word fun. Fun is assumed automatically. It's assumed that the game is always fun, but a lot of focus appears to be on the game being fair. As I mentioned before, the gameplay is actually pretty good in Highguard, but you know what isn't good in Highguard? The team size and the map size. One of the biggest issues is that 3v3 is straight up not the right count for this game in this environment. When you get to the base defense, it gets a bit closer, but not as close as it should be. So what happens is that you end up with these huge maps where absolutely nothing happens because it's only 3 players on each team. So it's insanely dull until you find someone, and that normally only happens when it's time to fight over the shield breaker. But why 3 players? Probably because it was the most fair. Like I said before, the game originally had 8 players and was whittled down with mounts added because they wanted players to be able to loot up without getting pounced on by a squad, which, to make everyone feel like they have a fair shot, makes sense from a balance perspective, but the result is that it becomes slower and duller. I also noticed that there's the resource mechanic in the game to mine crystals to buy stuff from the shop. Now, I imagine a similar situation was there, where if you were, say, unfairly pounced on or you were able to gear up, you could at least back up, farm a little bit to buy the stuff from the shop you need while everyone else is out there and fighting. Now, I do agree, if this game was back at 8 players, there's a chance that some members of the team get beaten early and struggle to recover, leading to a bad experience. 3v3 is undoubtedly more fair in that scenario, but it is also far less fun. They also talked about base building in the game too, and that is an aspect of Highguard that is also rather underbaked. They said they had plans for stuff that was more involved and scrapped it, and I think you can see it on display here. Wardens have things that interact with the base, and I won't deny that actually blowing open a wall to attack people is kind of fun, but at the start of the game, all you do is reinforce walls, and even that doesn't quite make a difference at all. Base building would, I think, create a really neat dynamic to the game, adding things like traps, turrets, mountable things, and more. And I can see a real way where that could have worked like that, but of course, doing stuff like that with 3 players would be hellish, because having one guy on a mounted gun be able to take down a whole team would make for a huge feels bad moment. Same with stepping on a trap. So for the sake of fairness, I imagine it was removed. The part where they pivot to heroes is actually really fascinating to me, because they flat out state that they understand that heroes are not a very popular thing nowadays, but they did it anyway because it made more sense for the game. I assume, much like before, that it was for the sake of balance. If people chose heroes, that means that people wouldn't double up on abilities or ultimates that could create unfair things for the enemy. If heroes are in your game, then that means if one of them is busted, you can't spam them, which mitigates the effects of that mismatched balancing. This is really old school, but in Titanfall 1, you could customize your Titan a lot more. You can choose the gun and the special gear for it and which kind of chassis, but because of that, it kind of made really only like 1 or 2 Titans the best Titans in the game, and it became kind of ridiculous. Actually, people miss the Titan customization in Titanfall 2, but in the second game, they turned Titans almost like heroes in a way, with static kits, because in that way, you couldn't take all the OP stuff and mix it together. Titanfall 2 still has the Monarch and Stim car, but you know, they did their best. But to that point, every single choice in Highguard feels like it was a choice made in reaction to an issue with another section of the game. People need time looting and have a chance, so reduce the player count. Now there's too few players, so we need mounts. The shield breaker with a mount is too fast, so we gotta do teleports to catch up with them. Abilities were too powerful, so lock them behind heroes. I don't think this is exactly how it went down, obviously I'm not omnipotent, but it does appear that that is what we ended up with. The thing that really messes me up is that I don't really mind Highguard. It isn't my cup of tea for the most part, but playing it, I really don't hate it. Like, oftentimes, I actually find myself generally enjoyed because turns out a game that lets you shoot gun really good allows you to forgive a lot of sins. Isn't that right, Bungie? My biggest issue was by far the 3v3 nature of the game, as that was the most common complaint by so many others. So I think within a week, the devs added a 5v5 mode immediately after launch, and that goes in line with their initial statements about letting the community feedback help shape the game. 5v5, mind you, is genuinely a cut above 3v3 in almost every way. It is actually quite enjoyable at times. Not to mention, there is a lot of aspects of the game that are just really damn cool. The voice acting is top notch across the board. The starting screens for the game are also actually very neat looking. And I can't help but appreciate the fact that attacking an enemy base involves stabbing a giant sword into a shield to summon a portal for a huge cat battering ram tower. Like, I don't care about your thoughts on the game. That animation is sick as hell. All of this to say, again, I don't dislike Highguard. It's very mid, but its gameplay is good enough and its animation slick enough that I can forgive some of its relatively underbaked aspects, at least for a little bit. It's still not a fantastic game, but it's still at least a bit mixed. But unfortunately, a little bit isn't really something that flies in a gas game like this. Now, of course, it all started at the Game Awards. The last game shown of the night is normally a really big one. It's a big deal. It's right before Game of the Year. It sort of crescendos it up, and it's overall just a bit of a spectacle. For reference, the final games shown before Game of the Year in 2020 and onwards were Mass Effect 5, absolutely hilarious. 2021 was Arc Raiders and some Keanu Matrix thing. 2022 was Final Fantasy 16. 2023 was Monster Hunter Wilds. And 2024 was that new Naughty Dog game, Intergalactic. You know, all games that either have a cultural significance or an impact due to their studios or their long-running franchises or something along those lines. The thing that constantly gets at me is that Highguard being the final game in the Game of the Year show just went against everything the game set out to do. Every interview, every developer commentary, all the things I mentioned talk so heavily on this game being a slow, smooth shadow drop to then ramp up and find its footing, low and slow, like I said before. A bombastic final trailer at the VGAs seems to have never been the plan. I've tried hard to ask around about why this decision was made, and I cannot seem to find an answer. The only thing I've seen is that Jeff liked the game and wanted to show it off, but that doesn't seem like it's enough of the full story. There is a little bit of a possibility that because Wildlight was funded by Tencent, as Tencent funds like everyone nowadays, and Jeff does have a lot of Tencent related things in his Game Awards, there may have been a mutual interest there, but that is getting a little bit conspiratorial, and I don't know if it's enough for me to really kind of call that the reason. Regardless, the game was shown and the hate was instant. The game was laughed at and shit on from every corner of the internet the moment the words ex-Titanfall devs were uttered and then immediately transitioned to horseback. Now, call me crazy, but I am not someone who generally thinks something should be written off immediately without even playing the game, especially in the case of multiplayer shooters. Because the trailer, while not particularly inspiring, doesn't look like an asset flip or some kind of scam where it's very easy to judge a book by its cover. For such a high-profile announcement, I do think you should at least try the title before passing judgment. I know, super hot take. When I watched it myself, I wasn't blown away, but I tried to at least keep a bit of a neutral stance.
Astrobot took home Game of the Year, and so the tradition goes.
I don't know. We'll see. It's free to play gas game. We'll see. However, after the VGAs and the immediate bombarding on social media and etc., Wildlight went dark, as was their plan all along. And that only stirred up more confusion on the title. You'd think for the final game of the showcase, they'd have a bunch of stuff leading up to it. We now know why that wasn't the case, but it still didn't help with sentiment whatsoever. When the game did finally launch, it was bombarded with negative reviews within the first 10 minutes of its launch, throwing it to overwhelmingly negative on Steam. At launch, it had the usual streamers playing it, as was expected with the Apex launch, and then everyone got its hands on it. The Steam reviews did move up and now sit at a mixed rating, which I think is about where I would personally put it at the time of recording this video. Like I said in the beginning, I wasn't going to make a video on Highguard. I saw it, I played it, I left with the feelings I've already described to you. Some good parts, some bad parts, generally mixed. But then I heard about the layoffs. On February 11th, the lead level designer, Alex Granner, said that most of the team at Wildlight was laid off. Character designer and creature rigger Josh Sobel also confirmed he was laid off with the quote, most of the staff. Now, while there are no exact numbers given to the amount of people laid off, Wildlight's team was about 100. So considering it was most of the team, I'd garner around 50 to 80 people were laid off. And this was the ultimate death knell for the game, the final nail in the coffin. Not because the game didn't have a chance to recover, but because optics like this is specifically bad for anything that is looking to be a live service. Just a week or so ago, maybe a couple of weeks by the time this video comes out, Riot's fighting game 2XKO was reported to have major layoffs as well, just shortly after the game had launched. I was literally invited to the Riot event before the game's launch, and not every employee I had met there is still working there now. 2XKO as a game is not going to die. At least right now. It has a year's worth of content coming, and those will be coming out. But when a free-to-play game that specifically relies on the spending of cosmetics in a game states they've lost a ton of staff, why would players willingly spend money on a game that they now perceive as sinking? It's a strange perspective, but one thing about gas games is that the players need confidence that the game will stick around in order to spend money on it. This isn't a $15 expansion pack anymore. People want to use and get the most out of their purchase. And considering so many live service games have been going to the graveyard lately and all that money with it, not even to mention the whole economy and everything, you're going to be pressed to keep consumer confidence in spending. Highguard has a whole year's worth of content ahead of it, as mentioned earlier, and as planned for since the beginning. Even as the layoffs were happening, they released another one of their playable characters to the game. As I am filming this, they made another major balance update, one of their many, to continue making the game more balanced. But all of that won't matter, because now the optics are there, the main source of revenue from the game, as little as it might be, is going to dry up. Shortly after the layoffs, the character and rigger dev who was let go, Josh Sewell, made a long-winded post about Highguard. He lamented on the game's reception from the Game Awards, the toxic gamer culture that fostered into it, and his general sadness and disappointment on how everything went on. This spawned an absolute monstrous amount of articles and reactions, all specifically quoting the phrase, "We were turned into a joke from minute one," and many people saying that Highguard blames the gamers for why their game failed. And this is where I'm going to have to go on a rant of my own, because the dude is like 90% motherfucking right.
I'm moving different. This shit ain't nothing to me, man. I'm a dog. I'm biting the fart bubbles in the back.
The dude is completely right. It is unfair. It is extremely unfair. And so much of what he is saying is true. People spend all this time talking about how AAA sucks and gaming is dying and people aren't making stuff they want to make anymore. And this team of developers pull away, they go yank a bunch of money from Tencent, and they run away from one of Lucifer's megacorps and says, "We can't do what we want on Apex, so we are gonna do it ourselves with blackjack and hookers and a lot of Chinese money," only to then be immediately bombarded and compared to other failed video games. Like, am I taking crazy pills here? Is it such an insanely hot take to say maybe the game didn't deserve to be dragged through the mud after one trailer for it dropped? That just maybe it isn't a super ethical or kind thing to laugh and poke fun at a studio for laying off most of its staff because haha, it's like Concord? Was I raised on a different planet, or is this just genuinely how it is now? Like, the dude goes on about how the internal feedback for the game was really positive and strong, and then he gets dogpiled that is a culture of toxic positivity like Concord was, and I cannot disagree more. I played Concord. Highguard is miles better than Concord. Miles. Its characters are not particularly inspiring, but come on, the side-by-side is night and day. It plays better than Concord. It sounded better than Concord. I say again, it deserves its mixed rating, but call me crazy, I believe him. I do believe that internally people absolutely loved playing this game because the people at Wildlight are fucking shooter developers. They went to go make a hardcore competitive shooter. This is what they do. This is their background. They made Titanfall and Apex. Of course they like the game they made. Of course they're stoked about the game they made. Jeff Keighley says he loved the game so much he wanted to show it off. And you know what? I kind of believe him. If this was the kind of game that was for you as it was for them, then yeah, it has potential. I feel like I'm going a little crazy. The dude spent the last half a decade of his life working on this game because he couldn't do what he wanted in his current job. They went to go do their own thing, they got their big funding, and they set off to make the game. Then in the course of a month, one single month, the game is revealed, mercilessly shit on, review bombed into oblivion, and then him and all of his friends are laid off and get to be the butt of the joke because Highguard is kind of mid. I'm sorry, no, I reject that premise. I reject the idea that a developer can have to deal with shit like this and have a completely justifiable clapback and get put to the stake for it after everything that happened. No. Do I think Highguard would have succeeded even if it had its shadow drop and no VGA treatment? Probably not. Probably not. No. But I don't think the guy's entirely wrong. If it decided to do its shadow drop, it was on its own thing, and it was just this random thing that came out from the ex-Titanfall and ex-Apex devs, I think it would have been looked at with a different light. I do think it would have been hey, these guys went to go make this game. It's not perfect, but it's doing some weird stuff. And this is kind of interesting type thing. That's more what it would look like as opposed to immediate bombarding. Do I think that people were going to immediately like it because it was shadow drop? No, absolutely not. I genuinely think that the entire idea around the game would have been different. The guy blames toxic gaming culture for the death of Highguard, but he doesn't really fully. Even in his own tweet, he says that it just played a role and it wasn't the entire reason. And I can't disagree with him. I mean, as someone like myself, like a streamer, for example, I would never stream Highguard because if I did, all I would deal with the entire time is people asking me, why are you playing Concord 2, Bricky? Are you gonna try out the new marathon treatment? I hope you enjoy playing this game now before it's gone in 1 month. Like, I just don't want to fucking deal with that. So I'm not gonna play Highguard. I'm not gonna have to subject myself to that kind of constant toxic chat because it's super annoying. Whereas at least if it was the shadow drop version, maybe I would be able to get away as a bunch of people come into the chat and ask, what in the world is this game? Oh, it's free? I guess I'll give it a shot. See, the game probably still wouldn't have succeeded because even if they went back to the 8v8 gameplay and changed the game to fit exactly what people wanted, the game's hero design and art design are not inspiring enough to make people want to spend money on it. The only source of income in this free-to-play game are the cosmetics, and unfortunately, the characters are not interesting enough to warrant spending money, at least not to me. But I would have much rather preferred it come to its normal conclusion instead of having the internet try to speedrun its demise. So no, I don't think Highguard would have lived. Maybe it would have had a slightly higher chance if the VGA stuff didn't happen and if it was shadow drop, because at that point maybe there would have been some kind of general time and updates as the game built itself up and it wasn't immediately in a massive negative bubble in the entire world's consciousness. He makes an actual point. The consumer has a lot of power and a shitload of people put a lot of effort into immediately review bombing the game, and it does have an effect. He's not wrong. But even if the game had just gone its course and died normally, I could have at least written it off as a valiant effort and given them a good old better luck next time and not dance on their fucking graves. I can't believe I stand here today and have to act like this is a hot take, but here we are. Partially, I think it's a sign of the times. I think the jadedness of the live service genre has been felt so far and wide. A massive amount of people have spent money on games that now lie buried, or a watch of something beloved has fallen to corporate greed or worse. Highguard maybe was where they all turned their sights to, and I think they shot the wrong person. This game is not an example of corporate greed. It's an example of a lot of people making a game they really liked in a time where that kinship is not shared by the industry at large. Maybe 5 years ago, this would have done gangbusters if times were different and fatigue hadn't set in, but it didn't, and it won't. The death knell has already been sounded, and unless a miraculous comeback occurs, it will indeed be offline or on life support in a year or two. Future Bricky addendum here, a little extra bit thrown into the video. When I first played Highguard, it was out of curiosity, and therefore little to none of it was filmed. Of course, I wasn't expecting to make a video on it. But as I played more of the game this last week to get footage for this video, the feeling that Highguard was the wrong thing shot by the public became more and more prominent. The 5v5 mode is substantially more enjoyable than the 3v3. And I actually found myself excited to play it again for footage. Like, I was excited to load up Highguard. Now, I've played a lot of live service shooters, and I was sitting there shocked that I was having more fun with Highguard than I was with Apex, Rainbow Six, Fortnite, or anything Call of Duty was putting out. Now, I understand the risk I take by putting the onus on players as opposed to developers, but the more I play, the more I think just how ridiculous it is to review bomb a game because the people who made Titanfall didn't do it again, as if that was a choice they had, as if there's some sort of say over people's choices and how they spend their jobs and their creative visions they want to pursue. Wildlight literally stated they did not want to make a sci-fi game all of their lives, and they wanted to go off and do their own thing, and they were bit for it. And even if they could have stayed and made Titanfall 3, are you 1000% sure that under Electronic Arts' regime at the current moment, they would make the Titanfall you would truly enjoy? A video game is held up by its casual player base, by the everyman who is not as in tune with the internet and says, hey, let me check out that game and see. So when they only see article upon article of vitriol, video after video of Concord comparisons, and the game review bombed into oblivion, yeah, that's going to affect their purchase or their time in wanting to download the game. It's not like we have a lot of free storage space nowadays. The fact Highguard was actually able to recover all the way to a mixed rating from the beating it took is actually insanely impressive. I'm sorry, but the developer was right. It isn't the only reason it failed, but it absolutely played a part. The thing is, it doesn't matter if people thought the game was good or not, or for them or not. Video games are such a plethora of genres, styles, mechanics. It doesn't matter if people fucked with Highguard, but just maybe the team who made it didn't need to be ran out of town before it even launched. Anyway, back to past Bricky. It's a sad story. It's not one I like to discuss, and it's not one that should be celebrated by anyone, even if that was where it was going to end up, Game Awards or not. I stand here in this really weird cognitive dissonance where, like, yeah, I think the treatment of the game, the developers, and more is very unempathetic and just kind of awful to watch. And simultaneously, yeah, the game is pretty mid. It has some good parts here and there. It's certainly not like awful terrible, but yeah, the game is pretty mid. It doesn't mean they deserved this then or now. I also don't feel this need to hyper-analyze every single word of one of 100 developers of a studio who spent 5 years on this, immediately got shit on, and then fired. I can't imagine what that would ever do to your mental state, and I'm sorry, I just don't necessarily think taking pot shots at them for that and having them speak on behalf of the entire team is fair. Do I think the game maybe was in a bad time? Absolutely. Do I think that the people in Wildlight maybe liked their stuff a bit more than the wider public would have? Absolutely. Do I think that perchance what they aimed for in this genre, in this realm, in this style was wrong? 100%. Do I think Highguard would have made it again? I don't think so, but I still don't think this was the way. Honestly, if you like competitive team shooters, the game is free. Give it a shot, I suppose, if you don't mind killing an hour or two. I wouldn't necessarily say that everyone should go out and try it, but like if you like this kind of game, you may find it enjoyable a little bit. Kill a few hours, have a time with some friends, who knows? I would not recommend spending any money, as even if the layoffs didn't happen, I don't think a lot of stuff is very inspiring, but the layoffs did all happen, so I don't think it's going to be around for very much longer. I like parts of the game. I don't like other parts of the game. I think where it stands right now at mixed is the right place for it. I think the hate is both overblown and it's still not simultaneously a fantastic game. But that's nuance, baby. We need more of that in the world. Anyway, a lot of stuff today coming from the chest. A lot from the chest. Maybe I'm a bit naive. Perchance I could be naive, but I don't know. I see this and I feel bad. It feels terrible to watch, you know, especially since like I have so many friends in the games industry and that kind of thing, and it's just it sucks to, you know, because you imagine your friend working on a game and these decisions are not anywhere even close to what he would decide, or what she would want, and you just can't imagine being in their position. And so maybe it's naivete or maybe empathy. I don't know. Thanks for watching. It's depressing, good lord. I'm sorry I had to talk about Highguard, but yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. Happy New Year and all that stuff. I'll see you for Mass Effect next time. This time actually